Welcome back to our channel. We want to thank you for joining. The South Africa's foreign minister, for the first time, has answered the United States. Mr. Lamola came out and dived deep into geopolitics itself, calling the US hypocrisy and calling it misinformation and lack of strategic thinking. Mr. Lamola was talking about the current communication from the United States of America. In his conversation, he dived into the powers that every state has. He called it the instrument of state to make certain adjustments for the public and to develop certain areas within a country. That particular opportunity or that law or such powers is being owned by every state. In the United States, in the UK, across the European Union, in Asia, that every government has such particular powers. That the United States of America coming out clear to step into their internal affairs, according to the minister, that this is unheard of. He ripped into the perspective with regards to misinformation and lack of strategic focus. This is important because it is the first time that I heard from this minister that normally will not dive into specifics. We have seen his previous conversation in the United States of America talking about South Africa's position in regards to the war in Ukraine, the United Nations talking about veto powers. But this time around, Mr. Lamola came out and was pretty clear, reminding the United States of America that the country of South Africa will not waver, will not panic, and that at the moment, it's a strategic time for the continent of Africa, and South Africa will stand its grounds. Let's roll the clip.
Now, coming to the issue of equality, we've now recently seen a bit of a furore around South Africa's Expropriation Act, particularly with President Donald Trump from the United States issuing an executive order against South Africa, cutting aid, and also welcoming members of the Afrikaner community to the US as refugees, as it was stated there. Looking at how this has caused a diplomatic concern from the United States, what are the efforts that South Africa are making to actually resolve this?
Yeah, it is interference with the sovereign state. I mean, what is in the Expropriation Act is in line with universally accepted principles of reform, of redress, which is in our constitution, and it has got sufficient safeguards in terms of the process that is followed to redress the imbalances of the past. It is an open, well-known across the globe that South Africa comes from a history of racial segregation. And the segregation means that in our country as we speak, more than 80% of the land, particularly farmland, is still owned by a white minority. And the safeguards that have been put by the law are not something unique to South Africa. In the US, they have it as eminent domain. In Britain, they have it in various laws. Germany also has an expropriation law. France, there's no country that does not have an expropriation law. Even in China, they have it. And here there is sufficient safeguards to deal with this. There's no arbitrary deprivation. So we will engage with the US when the opportunity arises. We'll continue to engage with them, but we'll also engage with the whole world to give context to this reality that every state has got an instrument that enables it to expropriate in the public interest and also for public purpose, to build bridges, to build schools, but also to ensure redress in the public interest.
It is important that the minister went ahead to talk about the G20. That it's not as a result of that the United States is not going to be attending. That is a big issue. It's not a big problem for the country of South Africa, according to the minister. But if we look at the geopolitical issues around the world, the continent of Africa, to an extent, has beginning to make its voice heard around the world. And that doesn't sit well with Africa's geopolitical partners. South Africa, for example, was singled out by the former administration, talking about strategic engagement. Make no mistake, this 2024 alone, last year, South Africa made billions in terms of trade, collaboration. There are hundreds of American companies that are currently located in the country of South Africa that are investing in the country. South Africa is a major economy. I'm not saying that you do not have fantastic economies across the continent of Africa, from Egypt, looking at the country of Algeria and Tanzania, and more importantly, looking at other very emerging economies across the continent of Africa. But it's important to note that this is coming at a time when the continent of Africa has made tremendous gains in West Africa. At this country, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, Guinea, all of them are fighting for their survival in terms of their own sovereignty. And Mr. Lamola, to an extent, invoked the conversation about sovereignty, that interference is an issue that, to my perspective, on what I heard from what he's saying, that South Africa would not tolerate it.
Well, you mentioned that many states have this. Why do you think South Africa's law has gotten this kind of attention?
It's because of misinformation. As you are aware, misinformation to the US. That is the reason, because it's baseless, it's without facts. No one can show you facts that show that since 1994, since this government took over, there has been arbitrary deprivation of land or property by this government. It has never happened, and it's clear the Constitution provides sufficient safeguards. It will be done in line with the Constitution in terms of how we do the redress. So it is misinformation. I can lay it down to that, and maybe obviously a racist agenda, because why will the executive order only target a white minority in South Africa as the people that must be given this refugee status? Because if you want to intervene in any situation where there is a persecution, it should not be race-based. And in South Africa, the white Afrikaners in particular, they own the majority of the land. There is no persecution. They live in accordance with the Constitution, unless we're dealing with the issues of nostalgia, of wanting to revert back to apartheid.
You mentioned the executive order, and one other thing that's also mentioned in that executive order is South Africa's case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. We've also seen the US take some action against the staff at the ICJ, South Africa offering them sort of a safeguard here. To what extent do you think that the ICJ case has played a role in the issuing of that executive order?
Yeah, obviously it is in the executive order, so it means in the back minds of the authorities in Washington, it is an important issue. But we have not received any direct communication from Washington that this is the issue. We want you to either withdraw or do this about the ICJ. But if we do, we will stand our ground, because our basis of the ICJ case is the universally accepted principles in terms of the UN Charter, in terms of the UN positions as an organ of the United Nations, the highest judicial organ of the United Nations. We have followed all those, and we have done it in line with the established convention, the Genocide Convention. So there is no basis whatsoever to malign South Africa. If you want to argue that our case has got no merits, has got no basis, and so forth, the court is there. You can intervene, argue your point, and let the judges of the ICJ decide whether there's a case or there's no case. But we have been to court now 4 times. We have succeeded. And the court said there is plausible genocide. Allow due process to unfold. That is how the world is built, that the principle of the rule of law must be respected by everyone. And if there is any big lesson the United States has taught to the world, is the rule of law, the Magna Carta principles, universal human rights. These are the shared values between South Africa, the United States, and many countries of the world. Universality of human rights, the principle of sacrosanct of self-determination of any nation, sovereignty. And this is the cause for the Palestinian people, the sovereignty of their country, UN resolution on a 2-state solution. These are all United Nations principles, and we have predicated our case on that basis.
Make no mistake, the intolerance is not only about the country of South Africa. A number of countries around the world. We saw Germany came out clear and reminded the United States of America that the fact that you are a strategic partner does not give you the room, the flexibility, the power to interfere into our internal issue. We heard how the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz came out swinging to the current sitting Vice President of the United States of America. But let's go back to what Mr. Lamola was referring to and why sovereignty is a big play with regards to this particular conversation. Let's roll the clip.
Is America trying to bully South Africa?
Yes, it's obvious on the basis of economic trade and on the basis of some of the aid that are provided to most of our NGOs and to our government. As you are aware, there is only one program, PEPFAR, that gives us almost 17% of our HIV and AIDS program. But as a South African government, we fund 83% of our own budget in terms of the fiscus. But we run the biggest HIV and AIDS program in the world. So the 17% becomes significant. But we are glad that there is a suspension on the operationalization of that. But we will not be bullied into submissions. We will stand our ground on the basis of principles. But where the US convinces us on any issue, we are available to be engaged and to engage.
And one last thing, Minister, obviously the G20 will be a big agenda item for you, but you are also kind of leading South Africa's ongoing case at the ICJ. We saw you previously as Justice Minister involved, now as Minister of International Relations. A lot of other countries have also joined that case, in a way showing their support to South Africa. When South Africa launched that case, were you expecting all these other countries and all that kind of level of support in this matter?
Yeah, no, thank you very much for that. Indeed, we expected that the global collective conscience of the people will arise, particularly the UN Charter, because the case is based on that, the convention, the Genocide Convention. When we launched it, we knew that it's going to be difficult, particularly the vilification and so forth from the global community. And you will remember that it was also not broadcast in a number of international platforms. Maybe it was with the exception of Aljazeera. But we think that case helped conscientize the people of the world out of the Israel propaganda that their process was only to respond to Hamas. It became clear that this is aimed to as a collective punishment of the people of Palestine as a group, and the court found that can be done and occupy. So we are glad that many countries have now come in support of this process. It is necessary that all of humanity protect the rule of law, because the rule of law guarantees the future of everyone, an international based rule of law system. So we are very glad that that is happening, and there is this support by all these countries, and we are looking forward to the merits of the case, and obviously the processes of the courts will have to take a life of its own, which is currently unfolding.
Africa has made tremendous growth. If you look at its geopolitical perspective, the continent is beginning to make its voice heard around the world. Previously, Africa was criticized as a continent that does not want to get involved into global issues. Africa does not want to play its role. Now that the continent is coming out clear and making choices, it's not sitting well around the world. That's why we see things happening in the Sahel, Africans being pushed along the United Nations. The continent of Africa took a delegation to the country of Russia and to Ukraine to look for peace at the time. It was termed a begging mission. However, we all are seeing why election has consequences, as at the moment, the current president of the United States of America, Mr. Donald Trump, has said the discussions will move ahead irrespective of the country of Ukraine. And that's not sitting well with the country of Ukraine. That's the reason why the Ukrainian president came out and swinging, made their own position clear. And at the moment, Europe is reeling to regards to its collaboration and engagement with the United States. It's about time. We also have the president of France, Emmanuel Macron, call an emergency summit in Paris for European leaders to discuss the strategic importance of this moment. History will remember this time as the moment when the world was facing a geopolitical heavyweight pushing each other around. At the moment, South Africa has determined that it will not waver and it will move ahead to engage G20 members coming in and to talk on the critical issues that are affecting the continent of Africa and the global economy. I want to thank you for watching. Let me know what you think in regards to South Africa's foreign minister diving into this particular issue and giving their own point clear, and remind the United States of America that despite you are a strategic partner, there are areas which are no-go areas in terms of geopolitical engagement. For now, I will be looking forward to meeting you soon in our next episode. Have a good day. Bye-bye.